Sarah, a meticulous employee, found her once stable reality slowly eroding under her new manager's insidious gaslighting. At first, she dismissed his denials of past conversations and agreements as her own oversight, a fleeting lapse in her usually impeccable memory, attributing it to stress or a busy workload. She would brush off his claims that she had never sent that email, or that they had never discussed that project deadline. However, as his manipulations escalated, becoming more frequent and brazen, a chilling unease began to settle within her. The manager's persistent reframing of reality, his outright denial of documented facts, started to chip away at her confidence. He would look her directly in the eye, calmly stating, "That never happened, Sarah. You must be mistaken." Even when she held the very email he was denying in her hand, its timestamp a silent, undeniable witness. This relentless psychological warfare, a tactic disturbingly similar to those described by University of Oregon research, began to turn her own mind into an enemy, a treacherous landscape where memories blurred and certainty dissolved. She started to meticulously document everything, every conversation, every email, every minor detail, hoping to anchor herself against the rising tide of his deceptive narratives. Yet, even with her meticulous notes, the manager would skillfully twist her words, reinterpret events, or simply deny the existence of the documentation itself, leaving her disoriented. "Your notes are clearly inaccurate, Sarah. My recollection is entirely different," he would assert, his tone a blend of feigned concern and subtle accusation, making her doubt her own sanity. She questioned every instinct, every memory she held dear, feeling as though her internal compass was spinning wildly. The terrifying realization dawned upon her that this profound manipulation was coming from someone she had initially trusted, someone who was now using that very trust as a weapon against her psychological well-being. It was an insidious form of editing from the inside, her reality systematically dismantled piece by painstaking piece by a skilled manipulator who understood the reconstructive, fragile nature of human memory. Each interaction left her feeling more fragmented, more uncertain of what was real and what was fabricated. The world around her, once solid and predictable, now felt like shifting sand beneath her feet. She found herself replaying conversations, scrutinizing her own actions, searching for any flaw, any misstep that could justify his accusations, but found none. The manager's tactics were subtle, yet devastating, eroding her self-worth and professional confidence. He would subtly undermine her contributions in meetings, then deny ever doing so when confronted. "I merely offered a different perspective, Sarah. You're overreacting," he'd say, with a dismissive wave. Her colleagues, though seemingly oblivious to the subtle attacks, noticed her increasing anxiety and quietness. She felt isolated, trapped in a psychological labyrinth where the exit signs constantly changed. The weight of his denials pressed down on her, creating a constant hum of self-doubt. She started second-guessing her decisions, even outside of work, fearing she was losing her grip on reality. Sleep became elusive, haunted by replays of his dismissive words and her own frantic attempts to prove herself. The vibrant, confident woman she once was began to fade, replaced by a shadow of uncertainty. Every morning, the thought of facing him filled her with dread, a knot tightening in her stomach. She yearned for clarity, for a way to distinguish truth from the elaborate web of lies he spun. The emotional toll was immense, leaving her exhausted and emotionally drained by the end of each day. She felt like a character in a play, constantly being told her lines were wrong, her memories false. The manager's power lay in his unwavering conviction, his ability to project an alternate reality. His calm demeanor contrasted sharply with her growing internal turmoil, making her feel irrational. She started avoiding direct interactions, communicating primarily through email to create a paper trail. But even then, he found ways to twist interpretations, to imply she was being difficult or uncooperative. The insidious nature of gaslighting meant that the abuse was invisible to others, yet devastating to her. It was a battle fought entirely within her own mind, a silent struggle against a master manipulator. Her sense of self was under siege, her identity slowly being rewritten by his distorted narratives. She desperately sought an anchor, something to ground her in the truth amidst the swirling chaos. The realization that her own mind was being weaponized against her was the most terrifying aspect. She understood now that he wasn't just disagreeing, he was actively trying to dismantle her perception. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate, calculated campaign to control her reality. The psychological impact was profound, leaving her feeling vulnerable and constantly on edge. She longed for the days when her memory was a reliable ally, not a source of constant doubt. The manager's actions were a continuous assault on her cognitive functions, her ability to trust herself. She knew she couldn't continue like this, living in a fog of manufactured uncertainty. A deep-seated need for self-preservation began to stir within her, a quiet defiance against the erosion. She started to search for strategies, for any method to reclaim her mind and her sense of truth. The experience was a cruel lesson in the fragility of perception when under constant attack. She understood that her mental well-being depended on finding a way to counter his insidious influence. The fight was not just for her job, but for her very identity, her sanity. She was determined to find a way to stop the systematic dismantling of her reality. This internal struggle marked a turning point, a silent vow to resist the psychological warfare. As Sarah's reality continued to unravel under her manager's insidious gaslighting, she desperately sought a way to reclaim her sanity. The Anchor Protocol emerged as her beacon, a meticulously crafted three-step defense designed to combat such psychological warfare. The first crucial step, document, became her shield against the manager's relentless denials. Instead of engaging in futile arguments about past events or memories, Sarah learned to pivot. She would redirect the conversation, calmly presenting irrefutable evidence. Written proof, such as archived emails or meeting minutes, became her undeniable truth. This tangible documentation served to counter his false narratives, anchoring her reality in facts. It was a powerful tactic, forcing him to confront objective data rather than subjective recollections. The second step, delay, introduced a strategic pause into their interactions. Sarah understood that immediate responses often played directly into the manipulator's hands. They thrived on the spontaneity of the moment, where they could exert maximum control and sow doubt. By avoiding instant reactions, she bought herself invaluable time. This delay allowed her to review the situation, consult her documentation, and formulate a measured response. It effectively broke the manipulator's rhythm, disrupting his carefully orchestrated psychological attacks. She denied him the immediate gratification of her confusion or distress. The third and perhaps most liberating step was detach. Sarah began to consciously separate her internal reality from the distorted version her manager presented. She recognized that his agreement or validation was not a prerequisite for her own experiences to be true. Her reality existed independently of his manipulative attempts to redefine it. This profound detachment starved the gaslighter of the very doubt they fed upon. Without her emotional investment in his version of events, his system of manipulation began to collapse. His power waned as she stopped seeking his approval or confirmation. However, the protocol also illuminated a darker, more perilous truth. Exposing a gaslighter, even with irrefutable evidence, often escalates their tactics. They rarely concede defeat. Instead, they resort to more aggressive defensive maneuvers. This often manifested as DARVO, deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. Suddenly, Sarah, the victim, found herself accused of being the abuser. Her manager would twist her actions, claiming she was overly sensitive, aggressive, or even manipulative herself. This reversal of roles was designed to further increase her self-blame and confusion. It was a desperate, yet often effective, attempt to regain control and discredit her. Despite the effectiveness of the Anchor Protocol in protecting her internal world, Sarah understood that the external battle could intensify considerably. The protocol was a shield for her mind, but it did not guarantee an end to the conflict. She had to be prepared for the backlash, for the gaslighter's desperate lashing out. The journey to reclaim her reality was fraught with challenges, but with each documented fact and each moment of detachment, Sarah fortified her inner world against the encroaching darkness. She was no longer a passive recipient of his psychological assaults. Instead, she was an active participant in her own defense. Armed with strategies to protect her memory, and her sense of self. The protocol taught her resilience, a quiet strength in the face of psychological aggression. It was a testament to her unwavering resolve to preserve her truth. Each email saved, each delayed response, each moment of detachment was a small victory. These actions chipped away at the edifice of his control. Slowly but surely, she was rebuilding her reality, one anchor at a time. The manager's attempts to destabilize her became less effective, as his words lost their power over her perception. Sarah learned to observe his manipulations without internalizing them. She became an observer of his tactics, rather than a participant in his game. This shift in perspective was monumental, granting her a newfound clarity. The fear that once clouded her judgment began to dissipate. She understood that his actions stemmed from a need for control, not from any inherent flaw within herself. The anchor protocol was more than just a set of steps. It was a philosophy of self-preservation in the face of psychological abuse. It empowered her to trust her instincts once more, to validate her own experiences, and to stand firm in her truth. Sarah was no longer being edited from the inside. She was the author of her own narrative, reclaiming her story. Her reality, once shattered, was now meticulously reassembled and fortified.